Our out-of-touch politicians. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian Heise here, and welcome to another episode of Heise Says. I've got my stein of coffee and I'm having a good Saturday, I hope you are as well, when I stumbled upon this article on news.com.au written by Sam Clench. It's to do with issues raised by former Prime Ministers John Howard and Malcolm Turnbull, a warning about our Australian politicians, essentially how they are out of touch with the people they are appealing to. And can anyone argue with that? It certainly feels correct, anecdotally. Now, back when we had the election, one of the arguments I was trying to put forward was a hashtag called Shift the Window. I wanted to encourage people to vote strategically, to learn how preferences work, our preferential voting system, which is one of the greatest inventions for the democratic system that Australia has given the world. Once you understand how powerful it is really, I would argue, the best invention Australia has ever given. You know, a private ballot with preferential voting. Now, with shifting the window, I'm referring to the Overton window, and I encourage you to have a look at this video if you haven't, which I'll link above. Which, well, considering it's only got 870 views, a lot of people haven't seen it. But the Overton window, you can see here, essentially everything inside the window is either policy, and you've got, to the left side or the authoritarian side, and to the more liberal side or libertarian side, you have things which are more popular with the people. And the further away you get from the Overton window, then you get sensible policies, acceptable, radical, and unthinkable. Now, my argument has been that over time, the Overton window has shifted steadily to the more authoritarian left side of politics, primarily because the Labour Party here in Australia needs to depend on Greens' preferences to win a lot of seats. And you're seeing how a minor party there can actually have an influence on policy in a bigger party. And then that affects what's being discussed in the media, that affects what people are hearing, that affects what they think is acceptable to even talk about. There's certain things now that people, if you discuss in popular media, you're lashed out as a pariah, when years past you weren't at all. Now, I encourage you to have a look at the Overton window, to learn a little bit about it, and understand that you can vote strategically to help shift that window, to help shift the dialogue. Because otherwise you're going to get a range of politicians that will just be following and protecting their own position. So let's have a look at this particular opinion piece. So John Howard and Malcolm Turnbull issued the same warning about Australian politics. John Howard spoke out about a rot at the heart of Australian politics this week. Less than 24 hours later, another former PM joined him. So when two former Prime Ministers deliver the same warning within hours of each other, it is probably worth listening to them. This week, both John Howard and Malcolm Turnbull highlighted a problem that has plagued Australian politics for years and is only getting worse. We must guard against either or both of our political parties becoming composed predominantly of people who are not sufficiently representative of the people in the community that we want to vote for us. Well, yes, certainly. Mr. Howard told the Page Research Centre at his annual dinner on Thursday. The next morning, Mr. Turnbull broached the same subject at the StartCon business conference in Sydney, where he was the keynote speaker, and this is Matt Berry's event that he ran. As political parties get more estranged from the people they actually are seeking to support them, then you end up with policies that are out of step, he said. Well, do you think the policies that are put forward by the major parties are out of step with what the people are asking for? Let me know your opinion in the comments, guys. I mean, the position I have is shifting the window, and with our political system, I want a mix of politicians in the House of Reps. I want there to actually be a debate about things when they push legislation through, not what happened with the cash ban in the House of Reps, where apparently the rumour is certain Conservative or Liberal sitting members didn't realise they'd voted for it, or that it had gotten through, because they were just going with party lines. There you go. Is that what you want? Do you want your representatives in the House working for you or working for the party? and regardless of which side of politics. That's why I want a mix of people in there. You know, from all sides of the spectrum. You want to. Well, here you go. I would say diversity of opinion in our parliamentary system could be a strength. Diversity of perspectives and diversity of experience. Okay, I would say those are indeed an element of strength. That would be, and let me know in the comments, guys, because we all hear the thing, diversity is strength, but the social justice warriors break it down to identitarian things. They think diversity of gender, they think diversity of race. Okay, that's how they, categorize people. Oh, you've got this skin tone, so your thinking must be completely different to this person of this other skin tone. Well, no, it would come down to your lived experience. And that isn't necessarily a sign of externalities. Because, I think we need a merit-based civilization, but that's just my opinion. So, let me know what you think about that. Would that be one way of addressing this? Because it feels like we don't have it at the moment. So, the problem is that fewer and fewer politicians are entering Parliament with the sort of life experience that predecessors had. Just think about that. Running through the current list of MPs and senators, you'll find plenty of former lawyers, oh yes, consultants and political staffers, a handful of teachers, and to be honest, not a heck lot of anything else. See, this is the only place where I would argue for a quota in Australia. I know this is going to be counter to my whole approach to a merit-based, but I say we need a quota of small business people or people with sufficient small business experience in Parliament. We need to put a cap on the number of lawyers in Parliament. Okay? Let me know, what do you think about that idea, guys? What do you think about that idea? Because small business people, it's a unique situation when you run a small business. You see both sides of it. Often you can be working for a tiny amount of money when times are tough, and you've got to do everything you can to keep your people going. And then often you're hampered by the red tape that comes down from the bureaucracy. You don't have all the perks of the big business. And Howard, I think part of his popularity was he had a soft spot for small business, and that comes from his upbringing and seeing his father run a small business. So, ideally, our Parliament would be a reasonable reflection of broader society. It has always fallen short of that ideal. In the past, it was sorely lacking in diversity. Now it's increasingly lacking in experience, at least any experience from outside the Canberra bubble Scott Morrison so loves to deride. It's a problem. When I joined the Liberal Party in '73, it was a much more diverse party membership than it is today, Mr. Turnbull conceded, though he did argue the situation in the Labor Party was worse. In those days, the 70s, the Labor Party's members were mostly trade unionists, but they were unionists who had started off on the shop floor. So there were boilermakers and bricklayers and train drivers and people that actually worked, he said. See, that's an interesting point. You're going to get if you've worked at a bloody job, worked your way up, you're going to have a different perspective to some of these what shall we say, champagne socialists in Labor, the career politicians. If you've worked as a boilermaker, if you've worked as a bloody train driver. The Labor Party today is essentially an Arapachic class. Many of them have come through the union movement, but they went to university, got a job in the union and got into Parliament, or went to university, got a job with a politician, and then went into Parliament. Exactly. Is that the type of people you think need to be representing us day to day? There's plenty of those in the Liberal Party too, but we are nonetheless still more diverse. And see, this is the thing. You've got to. The lefties will constantly, or the social justice warriors will constantly argue about diversity, and you need to make the understanding is: do you want diversity of experience, or do you just want to tick boxes? And this is the danger, where people, and it was with this interview I did with the futurist guy. I can't remember his name, but I remember his idea of dealing with diversity of opinion was just grabbing a hodgepodge of people from different countries and different races. That was how he thought to overcome it. Which, yeah, people can ideologically align regardless of those externalities. We need a variety of thinking. I would argue, you need a crazy hippie greenie in the table and sitting, across the table from libertarian free market guys. You need them all to come together, and you need them to reach at least an element of consensus. And hopefully you get the sensible center. Hopefully you can get at the sensible center. But if we don't have freedom of speech, we don't have people to discuss things in public, if you raise something that, on the Overton window is considered radical, and then you lose your job, you lose your career, you get shunned on social media, then what's going to happen? It's steadily going to push towards, I would argue, a more authoritarian state. So, back to the article. The transformation of both parties has already produced very real consequences. Mr. Turnbull framed it as the difference between two different types of politicians. This is simplistic, but it's not too far from the mark, he said. There are people in politics, and they tend to be people like myself, who came into politics later in life, after a career, and so they're not lifetime politicians, who will have a look at policy and say, right, what is the best policy? And then, having identified that, work out how to politically sell it. The other approach, the highly political one, lifetime politicians tend to be like that. And they often tend to be politically successful. And they will say, what is the most political sellable thing that I can come up with that will get people to vote for me? And they will go with that. Well, that's probably is that one of the issues with our political system? You've got to get a mix of both. But if you only do the political approach, and you literally go from day to day, week to week, trying to win the political headlines, then you end up being politically successful in the sense of winning elections. But what have you actually done? Well, then the issue is you can be like the Democrats in America, where they're often at the whim of the news, it seems now. Clearly, Mr. Howard and Mr. Turnbull feel the scales have tipped too far towards career politicians. None of this is all that surprising. Mr. Howard in particular has been talking about it for years now. The problem is easy to diagnose and difficult to solve. But the man interviewing Mr. Turnbull at StarCon, Matt Berry, CEO of Freelancer.com, did offer one potential solution. It was an intriguing one. He asked whether the Prime Minister should be allowed to choose ministers from anywhere in Australia, instead of being restricted to members of Parliament. Now that's an interesting idea. Unlike in a company where I can come along and appoint a Vice President of Engineering or a Chief Financial Officer, I can hire anyone in Australia under Section 64 of the Constitution. It requires a minister to be an elected member of Parliament, Mr. Berry said. So you have to figure out who you're going to put in various positions from a pool of people that are generally lawyers or career politicians. I like that idea. I like that idea. What do you think about that one, guys? Do you think the Prime Minister should be able to select their executive from anywhere? Other countries, such as Germany and the United States, have that system. So when one of Donald Trump's cabinet members sensationally quits, not an uncommon occurrence, he can choose anyone in America to replace them. Presidents usually use that power to select people who are experts in their respective fields. Think, for example, Mr. Trump's first Defense Secretary, General James Mattis. Australian Prime Ministers rarely have that option. That is an issue, Mr. Turnbull admitted. The sort of principles of the Westminster system, I think, works better when the Parliament is larger. So if you think it's an issue in the Federal Parliament, where there are 227 members of the Parliament, imagine what it is like in the State Parliament, where you might only have a few dozen people to choose from, if that. At the other end of the spectrum, Britain's Parliament has 650 MPs. That's a much larger pool of talent to choose from. Well, what's happening in British Parliament is a world unto itself. The British Prime Minister has got more options, Mr. Turnbull said. He did stick up for Australia's system to some extent. I'd say, though, that often the qualities that a minister needs are not necessarily technical ones. It's important to have someone that is enthusiastic, that is open-minded and focused on the right policies, says Mr. Turnbull. But it's a question worth considering. With so many Australians underwhelmed by the level of talent in Canberra, should we start looking elsewhere? Now that is an interesting idea. What do you think, guys? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Like, share and subscribe. If you enjoy my content, want to help me produce more, I do have a Patreon where you can make a small donation. I have Amazon and eBay affiliate links where I receive a commission every time you make a purchase. I also have merch on heisesays.com.au. Right now we have handmade pocket squares that you'll find nowhere else in the world. And finally, I have PayPal and Ethereum if you want to make a direct donation. Thanks for all your support, guys. We really appreciate it. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye for now.